The electrician acted like he'd seen my wife before. Then he called her by a different name. My wife froze, her coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips. "My name is Diana," she said, her voice very high. The electrician turned red. "Sorry, you just look exactly like this girl, Crystal." Diana quickly excused herself to the bathroom. The electrician continued working uncomfortably, and I caught him glancing toward the hallway where Diana had disappeared. "How do you know my wife?" I finally asked. He dropped his screwdriver and scrambled to pick it up. "I don't. I was just confused," but he wouldn't look at me. After he left, Diana came back acting like nothing happened. She was checking her phone every few seconds. That night after she went to bed, I Googled Crystal, along with some physical descriptions of Diana. What came up made my stomach drop. Adult entertainment sites, preview videos, a woman who looked exactly like my wife doing things I couldn't process. Crystal Diamond, it said, with hundreds of videos over the past 3 years. The same 3 years Diana had been working from home as a freelance consultant. I clicked through page after page, each video dated and time-stamped during her supposed work hours. The butterfly tattoo on her hip was visible in every video, the same one Diana had gotten for our anniversary. "You're Crystal Diamond," I said when Diana came down for breakfast. She dropped her plate, and it shattered on the tile floor, scrambled eggs splattering everywhere. She didn't even try to deny it, just sank into a chair and started crying, but the tears seemed practiced and hollow. "Where's the money?" I asked, because these sites showed view counts in the millions. "Where's all the money from 3 years of videos?" Diana stopped crying immediately and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, calculating and cold. $470,000, she said. "Offshore accounts you'll never touch." I had to grab the counter to stay standing. We'd been eating ramen for months, behind on every bill, and she had nearly $500,000 hidden away. I'd been working 60-hour weeks at the warehouse, destroying my backloading trucks, taking every overtime shift they offered while she sat on a fortune. The electricity had been shut off twice last year, and we'd sat in the dark for days each time, lighting candles like it was the 1800s. I'd sold my father's truck, the 1969 Ford he'd restored with his own hands before he died, just to pay for her mother's funeral. $3,000 I'd gotten for a truck worth $20,000 because I'd needed the money fast, and Diana had cried about how guilty she felt that we couldn't afford a proper service. "I make $3,000 in a weekend doing private shows," she said now, like it was nothing. Private shows meant meeting clients in hotels, and she explained it like discussing grocery shopping. The girlfriend experience, where men paid $5,000 to pretend she was theirs for a night. Our anniversary dinner when she'd claimed food poisoning, our nephew's graduation she'd missed for a work emergency, my promotion celebration she'd skipped for a migraine. All lies, all bookings, all documented on her Crystal Diamond booking calendar I could see on the website. She'd been meeting strangers for money while I thought she was building a consulting business from home. She'd watched me skip meals so she could eat, watched me tape my work boots together because we couldn't afford new ones. "Why?" I asked, and my voice sounded broken even to me. Diana shrugged and stood up, grabbing her keys from the counter. "Because I could," she said simply. "The house is in my name anyway. The refinancing documents I'd signed 6 months ago without reading them, because I trusted my wife completely. She told me it would lower our interest rate and help us save money we desperately needed. Instead, she'd removed me from the deed entirely while I'd been focused on making ends meet. 3 years of marriage turned into a lie. 3 years of pretending to struggle beside me while she built her secret empire as Crystal Diamond. "I have a shoot in an hour," she said, checking her phone like we'd been discussing the weather. "Downtown at the Marriott, if you're wondering." "You can't just leave," I said, but she was already at the door with her purse and jacket. Diana turned back with a cold smile I'd never seen in 7 years together. "The house is mine, remember?" she said. "I'll need you out by the weekend so I can set up a proper studio in the basement. A studio for Crystal Diamond, in the house I'd spent 3 years maintaining and improving." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through something, that cruel smile getting wider as she typed. "By the way," she added, not even looking up from the screen, "you should probably get tested. The clinic on 3rd Street does walk-ins on Tuesdays. Mention me and you'll get a few bucks off." The door slammed, and I watched through the window as her car backed down the driveway, the red taillights disappearing around the corner like this was any normal morning. My legs wouldn't move for the longest time. I just stood there in the kitchen staring at the spot where she'd been standing. The broken plate was still on the floor with eggs drying on the tile. My knees started shaking and then gave out completely. I dropped straight down onto the floor next to the mess, my jeans soaking up egg yolk. The whole kitchen felt wrong, like a place where something terrible had happened. I pulled out my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and started taking pictures of everything. The broken plate, the eggs, the coffee mug she'd left on the counter. I crawled to the filing cabinet and dug through papers until I found the refinancing documents from 6 months ago. My signature was right there on the line where I'd given away my own house. The camera kept going out of focus because my hands were shaking so bad. I had to take each picture 3 or 4 times to get one that wasn't blurry. While I had my phone out, I logged into our joint checking account. $12.37 stared back at me from the screen. Yesterday, there had been $800 from my last paycheck. She must have transferred it all out this morning before our talk. My next paycheck wasn't until Friday, 4 days away. The electricity bill caught my eye from the counter where Diana always stacked the mail. Past due in big red letters across the top. Final notice before disconnection. I picked up the water bill underneath it. Same red letters. The gas bill too. She hadn't paid anything in months, probably planning this whole thing while I worked overtime to keep us afloat. My phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor asking where I was. I was already 20 minutes late for my shift and hadn't even noticed what time it was. I texted back that I had a family emergency and might need to leave early too. He replied immediately that I was out of sick days and any time off would be unpaid. I couldn't afford unpaid time, but I also couldn't stand up yet. It took another 10 minutes before my legs worked enough to get off the kitchen floor. I changed my jeans and drove to the warehouse on autopilot, not remembering most of the drive. The morning shift dragged by with me making stupid mistakes on orders I could normally do with my eyes closed. My supervisor kept giving me looks, but didn't say anything yet. At lunch break, I found Ivan eating his sandwich in the break room and sat down across from him. He took one look at my face and put his food down. I told him everything, the words spilling out in a rush about Diana being Crystal Diamond, the money, the house, all of it. Ivan stared at me like I was speaking Chinese, his mouth hanging open. Then he said I could crash on his couch as long as I needed. The relief hit me so hard I almost started crying right there in the break room. He patted my shoulder awkwardly and said his girlfriend might not love it, but she'd understand. The rest of my shift went by in a blur of loading trucks and trying not to think about where I'd be sleeping in 3 days. After clocking out, I sat in my car for a minute before starting the engine. The 3rd Street clinic Diana had mentioned was only only 15 minutes away. The waiting room was packed with people all avoiding eye contact, everyone there for the same shameful reason. When I gave my name at the desk, the receptionist asked if I had insurance. I said yes, and she asked for Diana's name since the insurance was through her work. The second I said Diana's name, the receptionist's whole face changed. She looked at me with this expression like she felt sorry for me. She said they'd call me back soon and to have a seat. I sat there for 2 hours between a teenager and an old man, all of us staring at our phones. They finally called me back, and a nurse took my blood and had me pee in a cup. She said results would take 3 to 5 days, and they'd call me. The whole thing felt like being branded with shame. By the time I got back to the house, it was dark. Diana's car wasn't there, probably at another hotel appointment. I heated up a can of soup and ate it standing at the counter because sitting at our dining table felt too normal. My phone buzzed at 9 with a text from Diana asking if I was still at the house. No concern, no emotion, just asking like she was checking if I'd picked up milk. I texted back that yes, I was still there and would be out by Saturday like she demanded. She sent back a thumbs up emoji to end our marriage. I couldn't process that level of coldness from someone I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. Speaking of our bed, I couldn't make myself go into the bedroom. The whole room smelled like her perfume, the expensive kind she wore to her consulting meetings that were really hotel appointments. Why would Diana suddenly drop the whole act after 3 years of keeping it secret? The electrician calls her Crystal, and she just gives up completely. No more lies, no backup story, nothing. I grabbed an old blanket from the hall closet and made a nest on the couch. The ceiling had a water stain I'd been meaning to fix for months. Now it would be Diana's problem, or Crystal Diamond's problem, whoever she really was. I laid there until 3 in the morning, my brain spinning through every memory, looking for signs I'd missed. Friday morning came too fast. I called in sick to work, even though it meant losing a day's pay I desperately needed. Instead, I opened my laptop and started searching for tenant rights in our state. Page after page of legal websites said that even without being on the deed, I might have residency rights as an established tenant. The legal aid clinic downtown had a website with information about free consultations for people who couldn't afford lawyers. I called the number and got an automated system. The earliest appointment they had was 3 weeks out. I booked it anyway, knowing I'd be long gone from the house by then, but needing to do something, anything, that felt like fighting back. 3 hours later, I was at the kitchen table with my laptop and a stack of bank statements from the filing cabinet. I started building a spreadsheet, typing in every single payment I'd made toward our mortgage over the past 3 years. Each row showed the date, amount, and check number from my account. The mortgage payments alone added up to $18,000. Then I added the utility bills I'd paid from my checking account. Electric, water, gas, internet, trash pickup, everything Diana hadn't bothered with while hoarding her fortune. Another $11,000 right there. The home repairs hurt the most to document. The new water heater I'd installed myself to save money, $800. The roof patch after the storm last year, $1,500. The furnace repair, the driveway ceiling, the bathroom tile I'd laid myself over 3 weekends. Every receipt I could find went into the spreadsheet with dates and amounts. When I finished adding everything up, the total came to $42,000, every penny traceable through bank statements and receipts. This had to count for something in court. My alarm went off at 5 a.m. Friday morning for my warehouse shift. I saved the spreadsheet to 3 different places and emailed it to myself before leaving. At work, I was moving pallets with the forklift when I knocked over a stack of boxes. Then I loaded the wrong truck with the wrong shipment. My third mistake was entering inventory counts wrong in the system. My supervisor called me into his office after lunch. He closed the door and asked if everything was okay at home. I told him I was going through a divorce and needed to find a new place to live by the weekend. He nodded and said he understood, but I needed to focus or there could be consequences. The company couldn't afford mistakes that cost money. I promised to do better and went back to my station. The rest of my shift, I double-checked everything, moving slower to avoid more errors. When I got home that evening, Diana's car was already in the driveway, along with a white van I didn't recognize. I walked in to find Diana in the living room with 2 guys carrying camera equipment. She introduced them as colleagues, helping her move some things for work. They headed down to the basement with tripods and lighting rigs. I could hear them setting up, drilling into the walls, moving furniture around. I went to the kitchen and heated up leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. The food tasted like cardboard, but I forced myself to eat it standing at the counter. Diana and her crew worked in the basement until almost midnight, their voices and footsteps echoing through the floor. Saturday morning, I drove to the clinic at 7:30 to be there when they opened at 8. The same waiting room, the same uncomfortable chairs, the same people avoiding eye contact. They called me back after an hour. Gabriella Hartman came in with my test results on a clipboard. She explained I was negative for everything so far, but needed to retest in 3 months. Some infections had window periods where they wouldn't show up right away. She handed me a packet about exposure risks and safe practices. I asked what the chances were of something showing up later. She said it depended on the type of exposure and frequency. I didn't want to explain my situation, so I just nodded and took the papers. Back at work Monday, I caught my supervisor during his break and asked about picking up extra shifts. I needed to save for a security deposit on an apartment. He shook his head and said overtime had just been cut because business was slow. The warehouse was overstaffed as it was. He'd let me know if anything opened up, but couldn't promise anything. The timing couldn't be worse when I needed every dollar I could get. That afternoon, I called 3 different title companies about the refinancing Diana had done 6 months ago. The first 2 wouldn't even talk to me since my name wasn't on the deed anymore. They said it was confidential information. The third company said I'd need a lawyer to get any documents or challenge anything about the refinancing. Without legal representation, they couldn't help me. I hung up feeling more trapped than ever. Tuesday morning, I called the bank directly about our mortgage. After being transferred 4 times, I finally got someone who could look up the account. The representative confirmed what I already feared. The refinancing had removed me from the deed completely, and I'd signed the papers myself. She pulled up the documents and said everything was legal and binding. Diana had planned this perfectly while I trusted her blindly. I asked if there was any way to contest it. She said I'd need to talk to a lawyer about that. The bank couldn't give legal advice. Wednesday, I finally got through to a divorce attorney's office after calling 6 different firms. Most wanted consultations fees just to meet. Bryce Myers' office had an opening for Monday morning. The receptionist mentioned their retainer was $5,000 to take a case. I almost hung up, but forced myself to keep the appointment anyway. Maybe they had payment plans or something. Friday afternoon, while Diana was at another appointment, I tried to get into her laptop she'd left on the coffee table. Every password I I tried was wrong. She changed them all since I discovered her secret. Her Crystal Diamond website was still bookmarked on my phone, though. The booking calendar showed she had 3 appointments this weekend: Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Sunday evening. Each one probably paid more than I made in a month at the warehouse. Sunday night, Diana came home with takeout from the Chinese place we used to order from for special occasions. She set the bags on the counter and started pulling out containers like nothing was wrong. She asked if I wanted to eat with her. I said no and stayed in the living room. She shrugged and said the house would be all hers tomorrow anyway. She ate her dinner at the table while scrolling through her phone, occasionally laughing at something on the screen. Her casualness about destroying my life was almost worse than if she'd been angry or mean about it. Monday morning came too fast, and I barely slept thinking about the meeting with the lawyer. The office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a payday loan place, which should have told me something. Bryce Myers looked younger than me, maybe 30, with a cheap suit and an office that smelled like old coffee. He listened to my story while typing notes on a laptop that had tape holding the screen hinge together. When I finished talking, he leaned back and told me the truth I didn't want to hear. Since the house was legally in Diana's name only after that refinancing, my options were limited. We could fight for marital assets and argue I was deceived, but it would be expensive and take months, maybe years. The retainer alone was $5,000 I didn't have. I started to stand up to leave, but he stopped me and said he'd take my case for $2,500 down and monthly payments. He'd handled cases like this before and knew what it felt like to lose everything. I signed the agreement right there, knowing I'd have to sell more of my father's things to pay even the reduced amount. Bryce pulled out a yellow legal pad and had me list every single asset and debt we'd shared during the marriage. The list was pathetic when I wrote it all down. 2 credit cards maxed out at $8,000 each from when we were supposedly struggling. An old Honda with 150,000 miles that barely ran. Some furniture we'd bought at thrift stores. Meanwhile, Diana had kept all her Crystal Diamond money completely separate in accounts I'd never known existed. The more we documented, the clearer it became how thoroughly she'd planned this. Every purchase, every account, every financial decision had been calculated to leave me with nothing. Bryce said we'd need bank statements going back 3 years and told me to start gathering everything I could find. After the meeting, I went straight to work and caught Ivan in the parking lot before our shift started. I asked if his offer to crash on his couch was still good because Diana wanted me out tonight. He didn't hesitate, just said we'd move my stuff after work. The shift dragged forever, and my supervisor kept giving me worried looks every time I dropped something or forgot a task. When 5 o'clock finally came, Ivan followed me to the house in his truck. Diana was there waiting in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching everything we did. She reminded me that anything bought for the house had to stay, including the microwave I'd bought with my birthday money. I could only take personal items and clothes. Ivan helped me pack 3 boxes with everything I owned that wasn't attached to the house. My clothes fit in 1 box, my father's remaining tools in another, and some books and personal papers in the third. 7 years of marriage reduced to 3 cardboard boxes that fit in the back of Ivan's truck. Crystal Diamond's money must be sitting in an account somewhere that Brian never even knew existed, while he's tracking every single receipt like his life depends on it. Those camera crews in the basement sound like she's setting up some kind of professional studio right under his nose while he eats cold pasta upstairs. Diana stood there filming us on her phone the entire time, claiming she needed evidence I didn't steal anything. We drove to Ivan's apartment in silence and carried the boxes up 2 flights of stairs to his small 2-bedroom place. His girlfriend was in the kitchen when we walked in, and her face said everything about how she felt about this arrangement. Ivan had already warned her, but seeing me with my boxes made it real. She said I could stay 2 weeks maximum while I found my own place. I thanked her and promised I'd be gone as soon as possible. That night, I slept on their couch wrapped in a blanket Ivan's girlfriend grudgingly provided. Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Diana at 6:30. She'd already changed all the locks and sent a photo of the new deadbolts to prove it. They were black metal ones that looked more expensive than anything we'd bought together in 7 years. She said she'd call the cops if she saw me near the property. I was officially homeless except for Ivan's couch. I texted back asking about getting my father's workbench from the garage, and she replied that it was attached to the house, so it stayed. Everything was calculated to hurt as much as possible. Wednesday, I had to miss half my shift to go back with a police escort for my remaining belongings. The officer met me at the house looking bored and checking his watch every few minutes. Diana let us in with a smirk and immediately started filming everything on her phone again. I grabbed my father's hand tools from the garage while she followed us around claiming I might steal something. The officer just stood there looking annoyed at both of us. I found my birth certificate and social security card in the filing cabinet and took those. Diana protested, but the officer said those were clearly mine. The whole thing took 20 minutes and felt like hours. Living at Ivan's place was awkward, but better than sleeping in my car. His girlfriend barely spoke to me and ate dinner in their bedroom most nights. I bought all the groceries to help with expenses and cleaned the apartment obsessively to earn my keep. The dishes were always done, the bathroom spotless, the floors vacuumed daily. Ivan said I didn't need to do all that, but I couldn't just sit there taking up space without contributing something. Thursday, the STD results arrived in an email while I was at work. Negative for everything so far, but the relief only lasted a few seconds. Gabriella Hartman from the clinic called an hour later to remind me about the 3-month follow-up test. Some things didn't show up right away and I'd need to come back in 12 weeks. Until then, I had to wonder and worry about what might still be in my system. Friday at work, I caught my supervisor during lunch and explained I needed consistent hours to qualify for an apartment. Most places wanted proof of steady income and my hours had been all over the place lately. He said he'd do what he could, but made no promises since business was slow. Word had gotten around the warehouse about my situation, and now people looked at me with pity. Some guys offered to buy me beer after work, but I couldn't afford to go out. The following week, Bryce filed the divorce papers and requested temporary support orders. He warned me Diana would fight everything and drag the process out as long as possible. She had the money for a long legal battle while I was already struggling to pay his reduced fee. The court date was set for 6 weeks away, which felt like forever when I was sleeping on someone's couch. The process server went to deliver the papers, but Diana wouldn't answer the door even though her car was in the driveway. He tried 3 times over 2 days with no success. We knew she was home because her Instagram showed her posting from inside the house. The legal games had already started, and she was going to make everything as difficult as possible. My phone died completely during my Tuesday shift, and when I went to check why, the carrier website said my account had been terminated by the primary account holder. Diana had cut my phone line without warning, probably sitting in our house laughing about it. I drove straight to the cheapest phone store after work and bought a $30 prepaid flip phone that looked like something from 2005. The guy guy at the counter tried to sell me a smartphone, but I only had $40 in my wallet. Setting up the new number took forever because I had to remember everyone's contact information from memory. I texted Ivan first, then my supervisor, then started working through family members who needed to know. Each text cost me 10 cents, and I had to type using the number pad like we did 20 years ago. My mom called the new number immediately asking why I'd changed it, and I had to explain everything while standing in the parking lot because Ivan's apartment walls were paper thin. She cried and said she never trusted Diana, which wasn't true, but I let her rewrite history if it made her feel better. The next morning at work, I saw a flyer in the break room about the Employee Assistance Program, offering free counseling. 3 sessions wasn't much, but it was better than nothing, and I called during my lunch break to schedule them all. The woman on the phone sounded tired and asked if this was urgent, and when I said my wife had been living a double life as an adult entertainer, she suddenly perked up and got me appointments for that week. The first session was Wednesday after work, in a small office above a dentist's office that smelled like mouthwash. The therapist looked about 25 and kept writing notes while I talked, her eyes getting wider with each detail about Diana and Crystal Diamond. She kept asking how I felt about things, but I just wanted someone to tell me what to do next. We used all 50 minutes, and she seemed relieved when the timer went off, suggesting I might benefit from the other 2 sessions scheduled for next week. Thursday morning, Bryce called saying he'd found a property lawyer named Damian Montoya who would review the refinancing documents for a flat fee of $300. I met Damian that afternoon in his cluttered office downtown, where stacks of papers covered every surface, including 2 of the 3 chairs. He spent an hour going through the documents with a magnifying glass, making notes and shaking his head. Diana had claimed on the refinancing application that she was the sole owner of the property before our divorce was even filed, which was technically fraud since we were still married, and the house had originally been in both our names. It was a thin angle, but Damian said it might give us leverage in negotiations if we could prove she deliberately misrepresented her ownership status to the bank. He made copies of everything and said he'd write up a report for Bryce by Monday. That night, I couldn't sleep and started scrolling through social media on Ivan's laptop. Diana's Instagram popped up immediately when I searched her name, public and full of posts I'd never seen before. The most recent one from that morning showed her doing yoga in our living room with the caption, "Living my truth and loving every moment." The comments were full of heart emojis and support from people who had no idea what she'd done to get that house to herself. I scrolled back through weeks of posts showing her new beginning and fresh start, with photos of the house looking completely different. Our bedroom had new furniture, expensive-looking stuff that must have cost thousands, with crystal lamps and silk curtains replacing our old blinds. She'd painted the walls purple and hung up art prints of herself, actual professional photos from her Crystal Diamond shoots, but cropped to look artistic. One video showed her cooking in our kitchen, using copper pots we could never afford, talking about self-care and following your dreams. I wanted to comment the truth on every post, but Bryce had warned me not to do anything that could hurt our case. Friday afternoon, the process server called Bryce saying he'd finally caught Diana at a coffee shop downtown. She'd been meeting someone, probably a client, when he'd approached with the papers. According to him, she'd laughed when she read them and told him she'd been expecting this for weeks. She'd even tipped him $20 like it was a joke. Her confidence meant she'd definitely already talked to lawyers, probably expensive ones who'd told her exactly how this would go. That night, my phone started buzzing with texts from Diana's number. "Where's the water shutoff valve?" At midnight. "The thermostat isn't working right." At 2 a.m. "How do you reset the garage door?" At 3:30. Each message woke me up on Ivan's couch, but I didn't respond to any of them. Bryce had been clear that any communication could be used against me, and besides, she'd wanted the house so badly, she could figure out how to run it herself. The texts kept coming all weekend, getting more angry when I didn't answer. Saturday morning, I loaded my father's tools into Ivan's truck and drove to 3 different pawn shops to get the best price. The first place offered $500 for everything, acting like they were doing me a favor. The second went up to $1,200. The third shop, run by an old guy who actually knew tools, gave me $2,000 in cash after testing each piece. Dad's socket set from 1978 that he'd used to rebuild engines. His drill press he'd bought the year I was born. His hand planes he'd inherited from his own father. Each tool had stories attached, but Bryce needed $2,500 for his retainer, and this got me close. The old guy at the pawn shop said I had 90 days to buy them back if I wanted, but we both knew I'd never have that kind of money again. Monday. Bryce filed subpoenas for Diana's bank records and the Crystal Diamond website's payment records going back 3 years. Diana's attorney, some guy from a big firm downtown, immediately filed a motion claiming this violated her privacy and business interests. Her texts about the water valve and thermostat make me curious. Does she really not know how her own house works, or is she just trying to get Brian to break the no-contact rule? The legal paperwork kept growing, and Bryce warned me his reduced fee would only cover so much. Every motion Diana's lawyer filed cost me money to respond to, and they were filing them weekly. My 3 counseling sessions helped me see things I'd been ignoring for years. The therapist, still looking overwhelmed, walked me through all the times Diana had acted suspicious, and I'd explained it away. Business trips that didn't make sense, new clothes she said were from sales, the way she'd guard her phone like it held state secrets. I'd been in complete denial because facing the truth would have meant admitting my whole marriage was fake. She suggested support groups for betrayed spouses, but I wasn't ready to sit in a circle talking about my humiliation with strangers. Processing this kind of betrayal needed more than 3 hours of talking to someone who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sunday night, Ivan's girlfriend sat me down at their kitchen table with Ivan beside her, looking uncomfortable. She explained that having me there was affecting their relationship, and she needed her space back. 2 weeks, she said, to find my own place or another couch to crash on. I understood completely, but panic set in, immediately thinking about apartment deposits and credit checks and proof of income when I could barely afford food. Yvonne said he'd help me look, but we both knew my options were limited with no savings and a credit score destroyed by Diana's financial games. Monday, I started checking apartment listings on my lunch breaks, calling places that advertised no credit check required. Every single one was either in dangerous neighborhoods or wanted first month, last month, and security deposit up front. $3,000 minimum just to move into a roach-infested studio apartment 40 minutes from work. The clock was ticking, and I had 11 days left to figure something out before I'd be sleeping in my car. The warehouse supervisor found me in the break room staring at apartment listings on my phone and asked if I wanted to switch to nights for the extra $2 an hour differential. I said yes immediately, even though it meant starting at 11 p.m. and working until 7:30 in the morning. The first night shift was brutal, and my body didn't know when to sleep anymore, but those extra $16 a shift meant another $400 a month toward a deposit. deposit. The warehouse felt different at night with fewer people around and more time to think about everything Diana had done while I loaded trucks in the darkness. My sleep schedule turned upside down, and I'd get home to Ivan's apartment at 8 in the morning when everyone else was starting their day. I tried to sleep on the couch while Ivan and his girlfriend got ready for work, but construction noise from the building next door made it impossible most days. 3 days into night shifts, I had to drive past our old house to pick up mail that was still being delivered there. Diana had installed security cameras on every corner of the house with motion sensor lights that turned on when I pulled into the driveway. She was protecting the property she'd stolen from me like it was Fort Knox, while I couldn't even afford a studio apartment. I sat in my car, looking at the house I'd painted last summer and maintained for 3 years, and something inside me just snapped completely. I pulled around the corner where no one could see me and screamed until my throat felt raw and my voice went hoarse. 2 weeks later, the court date for temporary orders finally arrived, and I showed up in my only decent shirt, while Diana walked in, wearing designer clothes I'd never seen before. Her attorney looked expensive with his tailored suit and leather briefcase, while Bryce showed up with folders held together with rubber bands. The judge, an older woman who looked tired before we even started, listened to both sides present their arguments about support and asset division. Diana's attorney claimed she had no regular income, just investment returns, while showing bank statements with the minimum required to avoid contempt. The judge clearly didn't believe any of it, but said she needed more evidence before making any major orders. She scheduled us to return in 60 days and ordered mediation in the meantime, which meant more money I didn't have for something that probably wouldn't work. After court, Bryce pulled me aside in the hallway and explained we needed to shift strategy towards settlement instead of trial. Trials cost tens of thousands of dollars, and with Diana's money hidden offshore, we might spend more fighting than we'd ever recover. He said settling for something was better than spending years in court and ending up with nothing after legal fees ate everything up. I hated the idea of letting her win, but couldn't argue with the math when I was already behind on his payments. That night, I discovered Diana had never removed me from the car insurance policy we'd shared for 7 years, which meant I could legally cancel it. It was petty and wouldn't get me money, but gave me one tiny bit of control in a situation where I had none. I called the insurance company and canceled the policy effective immediately, then waited for the explosion. Diana's texts started within an hour, first confused, then angry, then threatening when she realized what I'd done. She called me pathetic and said this proved she'd made the right choice, keeping everything from me. But I didn't care anymore about her opinion. The next morning, I opened my own bank account for the first time since we'd gotten married and combined everything 7 years ago. The banker asked about my financial goals and savings plans, and I almost laughed out loud at the question. My only goal was having enough money to eat next week and maybe eventually save enough for an apartment deposit. She gave me pamphlets about investment options and retirement planning that I threw away as soon as I left the building. 3 days later, Diana posted a video tour of the house on her social media, showing off the basement she'd converted into a professional studio. She had new lighting equipment and cameras set up where we used to store Christmas decorations and old furniture. The video had hundreds of likes and comments from people saying how amazing it looked and asking about her business. Some mutual friends started texting me, asking what happened between us and why I wasn't living there anymore. I wanted to tell everyone the truth about Crystal Diamond and the money and the lies, but Bryce warned me it could hurt our case if I looked vindictive. Instead, I just said we were getting divorced and left it at that while she played the victim online. Ivan found an apartment listing in a rough neighborhood that didn't require a credit check or huge deposit, and we drove over to look at it together. The building was old, and the hallway smelled like cigarette smoke and something else I didn't want to identify. The studio was tiny with water stains on the ceiling and a kitchen that was just a hot plate and mini fridge, but it was only $800 a month. The landlord, who managed the building from his car in the parking lot, said I could move in with just first month's rent if I paid cash. Ivan helped me move my 3 boxes of stuff from his place, while his girlfriend tried not to look too relieved to have her couch back. The neighbors were loud, and I could hear everything through the thin walls, but at least I had my own door to lock. 2 days after moving in, I got the reminder call from the clinic about my 3-month follow-up STD test appointment. I sat in the same waiting room seeing some of the same faces from my first visit 12 weeks earlier, and we all avoided eye contact. Everyone there knew why everyone else was there, and the shame felt heavy in the air. Gabriella called my name after 40 minutes and drew blood for the tests while making small talk about the weather. She said results would be ready in a week and to call if I had any symptoms before then, which I didn't, but the anxiety was eating me alive anyway. A week later, Bryce called me at work to say the subpoenaed records from the Crystal Diamond website had finally arrived at his office. I clocked out early and drove straight there, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The stack of papers on his desk was thicker than a phone book and covered in numbers that made my head spin. Bryce had already gone through everything with a highlighter and sticky notes marking the important parts. The total at the bottom of his summary sheet showed $600,000 over 3 years, not the $470,000 Diana had admitted to. She'd hidden an extra $130,000 somewhere, probably in more offshore accounts we'd never be able to trace. Bryce spread out the monthly statements showing steady deposits into accounts at 5 different banks, all under variations of the Crystal Diamond business name. Some months, she'd made $20,000 while I'd been working double shifts just to keep our lights on. The booking records showed private sessions at hotels all over the city. During times, she'd told me she was at yoga or visiting her sister or stuck in traffic. Every lie had a dollar amount attached to it now. Bryce explained that tracking down the offshore accounts would cost more in legal fees than we'd probably ever recover from them. Diana had been smart about where she hid the money, using banks in countries that didn't cooperate with U.S. court orders. We'd have to work with what we could prove existed in domestic accounts, which was still substantial, but not the full amount. The mediation session was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the courthouse downtown. I wore my only suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews 5 years ago that barely fit anymore. Diana showed up in designer clothes I'd never seen before with an attorney who looked like he charged more per hour than I made in a week. Diana's timing seems really careful here, keeping him on the insurance for 7 years, then acting shocked when he finally cancels it. Makes me wonder if she kept other financial connections she thought he wouldn't find. We sat at opposite ends of a long conference table while the mediator explained the process and ground rules. Diana's attorney started by offering me $20,000 to walk away from everything and sign the divorce papers without any further claims. He acted like this was incredibly generous, given that the house was legally in Diana's name only. I wanted to flip the table over and scream about the 3 years of lies and struggle while she sat on a fortune, but Bryce had coached me to stay calm no matter what they said. We countered with a demand for half the current house value, plus $100,000 from her proven earnings. Diana actually actually laughed when Bryce presented our numbers, a cold sound that echoed in the conference room. She said she'd rather spend every penny on lawyers than give me that much. Her attorney whispered something in her ear, and she rolled her eyes but nodded. After 3 hours of back and forth, we settled on $60,000 to be paid over 2 years in monthly installments. It wasn't close to fair, but Bryce said it was better than spending the next year in court battles that would eat up most of the settlement in legal fees anyway. I signed the papers, feeling like I was giving up, but also desperate to just be done with all of it. 2 weeks later, the first payment hit my new bank account, and I immediately used it to put a deposit on a better apartment. The place was still small, just a 1-bedroom in an older building, but it was in a safer neighborhood where I didn't hear sirens every night. The property manager ran my credit, but didn't ask questions about the recent divorce or why my previous address was my coworker's couch. I signed the lease, feeling like I was finally moving forward, instead of just surviving day to day. The apartment had actual kitchen cabinets and a window that looked out at trees instead of a parking lot. Moving day consisted of carrying my 3 boxes up 2 flights of stairs and setting up the air mattress I'd bought at a discount store. The final STD test appointment came exactly 3 months after that first horrible visit to the clinic. I sat in the familiar waiting room trying not to think about all the worst-case scenarios that had been running through my head for weeks. Gabriella called my name and drew my blood with the same professional efficiency as before. A week later, she called with the results, and I had to sit down when she said everything came back negative. She told me I was lucky and should be more careful about partners in the future. I didn't tell her there wouldn't be any partners for a very long time, maybe ever. The divorce papers were finalized a month after the mediation session. Diana got to keep the house and most of her hidden money while I got $60,000 spread over 2 years, and my freedom from someone who had never really loved me. It wasn't justice, but it was closure, a legal document that said we were officially done with each other forever. The judge signed the decree without even looking up from his paperwork. 3 months after that morning in the kitchen when my world exploded, I stood in my small apartment unpacking the few things I'd bought with my settlement money. A real bed frame instead of an air mattress, some basic furniture from the thrift store, actual plates and cups instead of paper products. The settlement money wouldn't replace what I'd lost or make up for the years of lies, but I was building something new without deception. Diana still posted as Crystal Diamond according to Ivan, who'd looked her up out of curiosity, and I still worked night shifts at the warehouse for the extra pay. We existed in completely separate worlds now, which was exactly what I needed. Thanks for letting me poke around the edges of this with you. Definitely been a bit of a journey we got to share. I really enjoyed it. Until next time, like the video, it helps more than you think.